What's up, guys? Coach Bronson here. Last week we talked about how upper back weakness, in general, is probably not the reason why you're missing your front squats. It's probably leg weakness. Related to that, today we're going to talk about how your mobility affects what you can get out of your squats, whether you're using your legs or your hips and your back. We're also going to touch on how to squat if legs are your weakness, because it does matter. So let's get into it. All right. So last week we talked about how you need to squat upright if you want to use your legs. If you're leaning over, you're using your back. Typically, if your back is stronger than your legs, your body's going to find what's strong, right? Anytime you give your body a task, it's going to find the easiest way to do it, right? So if my back is strong, this is going to be what my squat looks like. Right? That's a very posterior dominant squat, very backside oriented squat. Maybe I'm trying to be upright, and so I start like this, and then I get upright at the very bottom, and then as soon as I come out, I go like this again to use my back. Right? That's a really good example of what you would do if your legs were weak, but you know you need to get a very deep squat. Right? So I might go like this. Something like that. If this is you, and you'd like your squats to remain more upright, and you need to work on not getting pitched over like that, what you need to do is pick a weight that you can do perfectly upright. This is going to be super annoying because it's probably going to be a weight that's like 30 kilos, 40 kilos less than what you can actually do pitched over. This won't last forever, but if you take a month or 2 months or 3 months where you say, hey, forget about the number I know I can squat. Maybe I've done 200 kilos in the past, but I can only do 150 kilos very upright, keeping my hips in between my heels. That's the number that needs to be your new 1 rep max, and you can base everything off of that. Just don't do any squats where you get pitched over. So once again, maybe I can do 200 kilos where I go like this, but I can do only 150 kilos where I go like this. It doesn't matter. You need to choose a weight that allows you to sit the hips directly in between the heels and keep them there on the way up. From this position, if you slow down take a video of your squat and you slow it down, out of the bottom, try and keep your hips here, right where they were at the bottom of the squat. Do not allow your hips to go out this way. Right? This is not what we want. We want this. And again, this is specifically for those of you who know you have an issue getting tipped over out of the bottom of the squat. If your squat is not a problem, right? If you squat 200 kilos and you can snatch 140 kilos, or you can clean, 170, 180 kilos, this isn't your problem, right? You're very efficient as it is. But if you're the type of person who has a big back squat, and your snatch and clean and jerk numbers are a very low percentage of that, there's a good chance, if you're, relatively efficient, that you don't have the quad strength that you need for weightlifting, right? Unfortunately, weightlifting necessitates a very upright, a very quad dominant squat, and there's not a lot of room for kicking the hips out the back unless your squat is just way, way, way far and above. Like if strength isn't your problem, then you can get away with whatever in a squat. But if you're like the rest of us, you need to maximize what you can do in your squat, because ultimately there are no medals for how much you squat. There are only medals for how much you snatch and clean and jerk. Therefore, the squat is an assistance exercise, and you have to do it in a way that contributes the most to your weightlifting total. If you think you're incapable of just trying to do an upright squat and going about it that way, a couple variations that might be helpful for you in preventing that hips out the back. We can do a pause on the way down or a slow descent. All right? If you start your squat with a slow descent and you go like this, it's very obvious that all my weight is back here, all the strain is back here, and not much of it is here. So take your time on the way down. Think 3 or 5 seconds on the way down. Starting with the knees first. 1, 2, 3. And I'm trying to find a burn in my quads on the way down. And then try and mimic that same pattern on the way up. Another thing you can do, like I said, pause on the way down. Right? My knees are forward. Not this. This. And then follow that. Knees go first, and hips sit right in between. I am not saying that sitting your hips back in the squat is wrong, right? Especially for general population. If you're somebody who doesn't do a snatch or clean and jerk and you're listening to this thinking, all right, I need to start with my knees first. You probably don't, right? I'm talking specifically about a high bar, very upright weightlifting squat where you need your knees to travel forward and you need your hips to sit in between your heels to stay upright. Another thing you can do, pauses at the bottom, just gives you a little bit more time to think about what you're going to do on the way up. But this has to be a weight you can handle and handle doing it perfectly. All right, if you try and max out your pause back squat, you're probably going to get to the bottom and kick your hips back a little bit. That's inevitable if you're really pushing it and your back is stronger than your legs already. But take a weight that you know you can stand up well, and that way when you get to the bottom, you can think about it. Okay, I'm going to leave my knees forward. I'm going to keep my hips tucked in like there's a wall behind my hips, and I'm not going to allow my hips to break through that wall. Knees stay forward until the very end, where obviously they have to come back to finish the squat. A couple things to keep in mind here. If you don't have the mobility either in your hips or in your ankles or both to achieve that very upright bottom position, then you're kind of going to be stuck doing back dominant squats, back and hip dominant squats. This is something I meant to mention last week in the upper back caving video. Perhaps part of the reason why you're putting all the weight on your back is not because your legs are weak, but because you can't even get in a position to use your legs. Which those issues are usually closely related, right? Like if you don't have the musculature and the strength available to put yourself in a leg dominant position, then your mobility kind of limits yourself, right? Your body's not going to put yourself in a position in which you're weak. So sometimes immobility comes from a lack of strength. So very closely tied issues. You need to work on both ankle mobility to be able to get the knees over the toes and leave them there, right? So that's quad strength and stretching out the backside of your ankles there, as well as being able to open up your hips enough to sit in between like this, right? A lot of people have a very tight inner thigh area and they don't even have the ability to open up their legs. Maybe their ankle mobility would allow them to go farther forward, but because they can't open up the knees to go this way, the hips can never sit directly in between the heels to make this position available. So they're stuck here a little bit more hip dominant. I'm showing you the extremes here. Your hips are probably going to retreat a little bit as you squat. That's not a big deal. But if you're the type of person who misses squats because you get like this, then you need to develop the strength in your legs, get the knees forward, and get the mobility to be able to allow that position. Right? If you don't have that mobility, all of your squats are going to be back dominant, and it's going to be really hard to clean and jerk or snatch a heavy weight like this, right? Leaned over like that. In addition to just doing your squats in a more leg dominant way, any leg accessory you have, split squats, lunges, things like that, do them with your weightlifting shoes on to avail yourself of that extra, even if it is artificial, ankle mobility, right? So that you can get the knees really far forward, and as you stand up, once again, leave the knee forward, stand up that way instead of this type of thing. There's also plenty of leg accessories you can do that aren't exactly like a squat or a lunge or whatever, like sissy squats, slant board quarter squats. All of those things are really good ways to get the knee farther forward, put more stress on the quads in a type of scenario where there's not so much demand on the ankle mobility. So if you have bad ankle mobility, maybe you work in some of those slant board quarter squats or like heel elevated quarter squats, sissy squats, things like that. And you might even be surprised, sometimes strengthening up the quads unlocks that mobility that you were lacking. Like I was saying earlier, sometimes it's a real chicken or the egg scenario. Like, is my mobility bad because my body is protecting my joints from going into ranges of motion where I'm not strong? Or am I not strong in those ranges of motion because I don't have the mobility to get there and train it? That's something you have to figure out for yourselves. Usually they're a very closely linked issue, so play around with it and figure out what the scenario is for you. Done.